Alright, welcome everybody to the Thursday stream. We're going to get started today with some more development on our alien containment unit. And we started last week with some color, so we're going to continue with that and make it look real pretty. So, this is what she's looking like so far today. And there's a few things I want to do first to start out with this is naming my layers. So let me get my Cintiq in line here. My layers are currently just layer. I mean, a couple of them are named, but they're not very indicative of what the layer contains or what it's doing to the rest of the artwork. So it's always good to get in there and change that stuff. So let's go and see what's happening here. Normally in a piece, I'm going to have a fairly good idea of what every layer is doing, a recollection, even, you know, like day to day. Since I don't work on this piece in between streams, you know, I might have to refamiliarize myself with that kind of stuff, because it's sometimes you don't remember, right? Especially if you've been doing a whole bunch of other things like I have. So just kind of looking at this, you know, I'm just gonna name that blood overlay OVR frame. So that one's pretty straightforward. Rim, we can call that vivid light. Actually, it's not a very exciting part, but let's get it started so that we can really dive into it. Call it vivid. You know, we have the kind of colorization. Let's go tank glass color. And then we can say water, tank water reflection. Okay, and then we've got alien color. And then we've just colorized the whole lower part with the concrete, so concrete color. And that's feeling pretty good to me. Some of our background is shifted off. That's something I can kind of get in there later, deal with. But there we go. So we're ready to get into it again today. We'll call that top tank reflection, actually. And booyah, we're good to go. I guess alien color gradient map. Cool beans. All right, so we've got a sense of where those things are going. So we're going to get in there and start to tweak those things a little bit, and continue the development of this. Hopping straight into it, get some nice, almost 2 hours worth of work in on it. Got to change. Hey Brandon, did you see the producers interview the new trailer in the 15 minutes of Little Nightmare 2? Nope. I saw a snippet of it. It looks interesting. As interesting as Nightmares 1 did. So, okay, I want to kind of deal with the alien a little bit. It's one of our key focal points here, and I want to start to get some different colorization going in on it. Excuse me, on him. So let's go find that layer. Control right click will pop up your layers underneath your mouse, so we can see sort of what we're dealing with in here, and we can see, you know, when we know what those layers are, then we can deal with them. Let's actually go find that layer. Okay, this is a flattened dirt layer. We know that we're dealing with some of the colorization on down here, alien color. Right, and this gradient map is also alien color, so let's just quickly fix that. We'll call it GM for gradient map. So that's a good first stab at that. Alien color up on top is sort of starting to tweak that with an overlay. I might start something else on top of that. I think I might actually throw in another gradient map because I want to start kind of tweaking things into yellows as well, just to get a nice kind of fleshy, visceral quality to things and not have it just be all one color. So let's do that. So we've got that coming in on top, and the gradient that it's picked is brutal. So I haven't looked into why it picks the gradients that it does. I'm sure it has something to do with my last color selection, but it does tend to automatically go to some pretty bad choices there. Anyway, let's try and find something that's a little bit more yellow. And when I'm doing this, I'm paying attention to just the tendrils. I'm gonna obviously get rid of everything else, so we'll work with it. But let's set up the mapping properly here. Yeah, I mean, it's not so what's happening when I map it like this is that it is mapping everything. It's mapping all the values as if we've laid them out here, but we can see that we're not affecting the tendrils like I want to affect them. I want to add a little bit of a lighter value to them by using this gradient map. So what happens is most of my values are sitting down in here. We can see sort of like how they're being affected by color by looking at their corresponding value. And here's like, yeah, the yellow is affecting it. But if I popped in another yellow, what you're going to see, especially if it's 100% saturation, 100% brightness, oh, we're not at 100% saturation, but you'll see that it actually starts to affect that a little bit, right? So I like that. I want it to be more saturated than anything because, again, I'll be able to paint it out in the mask. So I'm going to go somewhere in this ballpark of really saturated, and then I'll just bring it in as I need it. So that feels pretty good to me, even though it doesn't look super great right now. And then what I'll do is I'll just take my paint bucket, select a black, because I'm going to be obliterating everything that gradient map touches in the mask. Then I can grab the old airbrush and make sure the mask is selected so you're not drawing in the artwork. And then I can come in here and I can, pick a white. Then I can come in here and start adding some of the yellow that I wanted, right? Sort of like, almost like a fascia, fascia in there. Might start adding that a little bit to the teeth. I could set up the eyes with a bit of yellow as well, because we can always go back and kind of tweak those guys to be a little bit different in there later. And we mentioned it last time that you really do have to have some patience for some of these effects to come to fruition later, and not expect to kind of just snap your fingers with a few blend modes and everything's done, right? At least in this method of painting. So we'll go in there and kind of give some of these some treatment. I'm not going to keep all these teeth yellow and the eyes yellow, but I like the idea that the yellow is going to be an analogous pairing, at least to start, to get some of these things looking better or more varied anyway. The other reason for doing this is if you kind of just leave a flat color on something that's organic, it can tend towards feeling like it's just a facsimile of a real thing rather than sort of an organic object that will have hue fluctuation, saturation fluctuation throughout, right? Some variance of color in there. That's feeling better already. Reds and yellows are going to be a nice warm color temperature to play off of some of the cool colors from the tank as well, right? So we're kind of making this thing feel as much as we can maybe foreign to the rest of the kind of man-made structures in there to play on that narrative a little bit. Okay, so what else here? Something that I might try is another gradient map. Well, we'll try it as a gradient map anyway. And I want to kind of apply something that's maybe a little bit more, let's say, pale, fleshy, to set off sort of the visceral quality of all the reds. And so I'm gonna go kind of pick a pale skin tone. So we'll start maybe, we know that we're gonna be playing mostly in this value range because the tentacles are not lit super strong. So I might start with that, and I might, so you can see I'm bumping up the values as I assigned all my blacks with a fairly bright value. Okay, and then of course my light values can be something that's a lot brighter in that pale skin tone vibe. Okay, and I can just move that down further to have that kind of come through in there. This may need to be a lot more saturated as well. Something like that. And then we'll blast that away. What I like about this specific approach is that I can kind of gauge what it looks like. It's obviously affecting everything. We don't like that by the end, but I can see how it feels, and then I can get rid of it. And then we can do the exact same thing with painting back in some of the effect with our mask. Some of this is definitely exploratory, right? You guys want to be experimenting if you have time, right? In certain cases where you have to get assets done for a client, you know, you've got to just do your best to save some time and get the final product out the best you can, right? It's not always super easy or ideal when working with these kinds of things. And this is, again, one way of doing this with the gradient map. I can get in there with a host of other methods of painting in the color and the fleshy elements, depending on what I'm after. But if everything is sort of this bloody tendril, then I just feel like nothing's going to be special, you know? So you're going to have some contrast in the way that stuff comes across. Already that's, to me, feeling a bit better. Like the tendril coming out of the teeth there might be something that is a lot more red. Just gonna get rid of a little bit of that stuff that I painted over under the teeth there, because I'm gonna have almost like lips come up to the surface on the other mask. Something like that. Some of these teeth are getting a little bit bright as well, but again, it's not like this is going to be the last step that I make in the development of the piece. I can go back and I can add shadow back in later, right? So I kind of like the idea maybe also that these eyes are glowing, so at this point I might kind of just pull off the road here and see what a dodge would look like with those eyes glowing a bit. That might be a lot of fun. Investigate it, see what it feels like. So what's happening is I'm not getting the effect I want as much as I paint. So I know that maybe some of those other layers that I've been painting are going to kind of step on top of it. So I can move that all up over top. So we'll go eye bloom. We'll say eye glow actually, and LD for linear dodge. Now that I can see it up on top, I actually might take another stab at it, because I have more control now. So I go a little bit warmer with the glow. Some of the details are becoming lost a little bit. If I'm ever curious, I can go back to the line drawing to see what I've left out or what I'm missing. I'm not going to worry about that at this point. Do you get faster in brainstorming and designing concept as the better you become at concept art? Yeah, I mean, I think that's true of anything. You get better at anything after you practice it enough, right? You encounter the situations where you have to problem solve, and then you figure out sort of how you're gonna, fix things. Juniors are typically not too aware of. It depends on sort of how much a junior's practiced and where they've studied and what they know, of course. But juniors tend to be kind of caught up in really trying hard technically to be good at what they're doing. So sometimes, they can get distracted by that, I guess. It's a good distraction, but it can still be something where you're not maybe thinking too much of the creative end of things to make sure that stuff is looking pretty good. But yeah, you get better. Some of these eyes, if they're glowing, they're light sources, right? So they should probably be casting light onto parts of the face. If that would make sense, right? For sorry, that would make sense for any other light source. It would make sense for this as a light source, even though it's a biomorphic sort of form. So say on the face in here, right, these lights, we'll call them lights, are going to light up parts of the face. Little skin folds and whatnot that are sticking out enough that you would actually see those things. And then you can just have that fade off wherever you think that's not going to be the case. Like so. This kind of thing really does help your viewer understand the volumes, because we're dealing with a 2D format here, right? So we're not always going to run into easy times in terms of convincing people of three-dimensional elements. As I paint these things in, I am thinking about their volume quite a bit. Where that light's going to be cast to and from. And of course, how that light's going to fall off from there. Some of these teeth might be sticking out quite a bit, so they're going to catch a little bit of that light, more so than maybe some of the others, right? So we can use that to our advantage to kind of give a sense of where those teeth are sitting in space. Have a good weekend. I did. How did your weekend go? What'd you get up to? Just going through here and kind of tagging some of these other surfaces. The reason why I would spend this much time on the face at this point is because I mean you're going to tend to look for a face and maybe focus in on something like that. So that can be a good thing for us. One of the things I might want to establish is sort of the depth of this guy as well. He's in the shadow at the back, right? Which is great. I might want to establish sort of how close one of those eyes is to the glass by indicating kind of a reflection on the glass itself. So I can kind of start to get a little bit of the reflection kind of coming off of the glass as that's sort of really close in there. Stuff together for the old university. Excellent. It'll be really interesting to see how universities respond to online teaching or if it's still brick and mortar for you guys, how the challenges of that will be for sure. Won't be easy. Of course, CG Spectrum being a remote school doesn't have those issues, so we're lucky. Well, we're not lucky. I mean, it's just the way things are for us. So, but it will be interesting to see. You know, even teachers not used to doing that kind of thing. You know, somebody that's had tenure at a university forever and has always taught in a classroom, how they're gonna be able to deal with having to do that all online. Wonder if you'll see a lot of retirement from older instructors being like, nah, I'm out. Thanks for the fish. Not feeling too bad here. All right. We'll get a little bit of the light coming from this side on that tooth. That one's maybe sticking out quite a bit. So I picked just a lighter value so that the irises can be painted faster rather than trying to kind of press and press and press and press to get that bloom up. Because I know I just want it to be bright. I don't want to mess around with that. All these little eyes have their own little iris. Right, so at a distance, we're painting that stuff in, kind of just taking a look at how that's working now. Starting to get some punctuation, I guess, in the darkness for this, which is nice because some of these tendrils are starting to get fairly dark in there, right? So we take a look. It's a nice way of kind of amping that stuff up. So yeah, feeling pretty good. We could do the exact same thing with the water and the way that's affecting the colorization on top of this. So the bigger I can get in there and give some more specific kind of detail to how the iris, I guess, tissue is coming together. I might use more of the bright values in there to kind of have some of this stuff spider out. Would I do this with every single iris? No, because some of them are just so small, right? The way I'll treat it is sort of maybe this one is the best case for being able to see it because it's so big. Right, kind of using that goat eye iris. That thing spider out from there. With the core of that one, I might even pick something that's closer to white because I can be able to get more of like a white glow from within that. Right. Just as maybe one of the brighter examples of an iris. Okay. So with something like that's throwing light like this, it is going to reflect off of certain surfaces. Right. So I might get a bit of a reflection off of the edge of the container. Not looking too bad. Let's go serve some of those other areas a little bit. Actually, I'm gonna just kind of finish up some of the lighting, self-lighting that we would see in here. Gunning for some overlaps so we can see that stuff kind of disappearing behind there. Some of these spines will be kind of lit up. Class goes in lockdown. The unions email how they're going to do things. Actually interesting. Seminars are online with chat. Speaking of teacher groups will be Zoom, and when we do any traditional animation, it'll be in small groups spaced out. Okay, cool. Went into arrested. Yeah, I think people are, well, governments I think are getting a little bit more serious about that over time. See people not paying attention to the rules. Go bust it up. I know where my light sources are. This original stuff is, these light sources are kind of annoying to me. Interesting thing, I had this idea that there'd be maybe a warning light on either side for kind of the breach container. I feel like that might be a little bit much. I like this limiting my light sources if I can, so that it's sort of just a really nice clean representation of something. Anyway, I can bring that back later, but I'm definitely gonna go in there and blot those out. I just have to turn my linear dodge off. There we go, a little bit better. Okay. Something we can do as well is like at some point this image got dragged up and over to the left hand side. I can just drop another layer in there that's either, you know, like black, kind of solve it in a really rough way, but we are seeing a little bit of that black edge. So another thing that you can do with, say, the flattened dart piece is just go in and select the lower portion of it, marquee selection, and then hit your transform tool and just pull that down. So it'll be an extension of similar artwork. You know, it's not It's not a bulletproof way of doing it, but at least it's something. Conversely, we could just re-crop it, which I don't think would be a bad call either. So, whoops. Not what we want to do. Hit that again, and then we can just park that inside those lines. And be good to go. Will I do any concept art inspired by Little Nightmare 2 game? The creatures and horror aspect are interesting. No, I probably won't, because I'd rather be a little bit more familiar with it. And, does not pique my fancy right now, but that doesn't mean you can't, right? So make sure that when you're interested in things like that, you get in there, right? Get in there and play around with that stuff, because I think it's important that you have fun with it. Let's go with the water bloom LD. Let's just say water light LD. What will I do next? We'll decide on the fly. See how things are going. Maybe it'll be something adventure based rather than horror. We're kind of playing into the dark horror vibe right now. It'd be nice to, I think, lighten the mood a bit. So, I mean, a lot of the light's coming up and out of this tank right now, right? So what I'd want to do with that is have the light source actually hit the surfaces of my homeboy in here, right? So it actually looks like that light is affecting things. Because right now it's not really being cast well onto some of these forms. So kind of get in there and have that light kind of move around. Thinking back to our masking, we can always get rid of this stuff, right? So might be nice right now to just service some of that light, the color of that light, as it's kind of projecting up and into our fella here. A lot of this stuff is going to have some of that weak bluish light come up in there and light those things up. Not feeling too bad. We do have a little bit of like squeaking out of the back side of that, so it might hit some of these surfaces as it wraps around, right? So I'd use that to my advantage to try and kind of pull out a bit of a rim on that. I could probably get away with cheating a rim all the way around, which may not be a bad call, just because I don't want to lose tons of that outside edge to not being able to see it. Conversely, there might be some sort of atmospheric that kind of moves up in the back, right? That could help us pull some of that information out, which is maybe not a bad call. but I want to set that atmospheric up on a different layer so I can affect that. I'm just kind of working with the lighting right now, but maybe we'll work with that that idea a little bit later. Kind of modeling these forms as I go. I've laid down some information with my original value scale render, right? So I know where they are, and now I can kind of apply some of the lighting to the lighting that I've already laid down. Just add more to it. You like the Animaniacs, don't you? Maybe Evil Dora. Like I said, it might be nice to kind of change things up. So Dora's a nice one because it's a little bit goofy, right? Not feeling too bad. I am stomping a bit of the shadows that I've laid out in there. You know, I can go back and tweak that for sure. Not too worried about that either. A lot of this is just me kind of planning where my modeling of the volumes is going. You know, what's getting hit by that light, what's not getting hit by that light. Bagpuss, I don't know what that is. Do not know. No, I if anything evil, I would stick with the Dora. Part of that sort of like challenging yourself to make something appealing, or to use something that is based on an existing IP where you would be riffing on it, right? I think there's something there where the character's kind of super cutesy. Get those little water droplets as well. Those things nice and bright. Right now, just like these little dark nuggets hanging in space. So sometimes what will happen is the light will bounce up into a reflecting surface and then bounce into another surface, right? So that reflected light, we could get some really weak light bouncing off again from another surface that isn't the direct light, right? So light is a complicated thing. Get some of these guys over in the darkness here because they really need it. Let's throw in the water atmospherics. This is going to be one I'm going to definitely work with a bit of the masking. So I want it to be a bit brighter, a little less saturated. Something like that. When doing this kind of thing, you want to look out for the shadowy sides of an object, right? Because that's the lighter value that you're going to be putting in there is going to be the contrast between your dark, shadowy areas and the atmospheric in behind. Let's go through a mask on that. Hello, welcome. Welcome. So, you know, just start cutting that in. I mean, there could be some atmospherics up over top, but again, we're not erasing anything. We're actually just using our mask tool, right? If I wanted to make this guy, the back side of the arm, feel like it's disappearing around the side, we actually might do that. So let's investigate that as we go. But you'll see on the darker sides now, as I erase into this mask, the edge of that side is easier to read, right? So that might be really beneficial for us in instances where we aren't getting something reading super clear because of the nature of the way we set up the lights. So we can manipulate other things in the scene to help us kind of achieve a certain look or legibility to some of this stuff. Right, so without, and then with. It's just like on the darker sides, like the lighter sides we can see obviously, but the darker sides become more easily read at a distance, right? And it's kind of giving it a nice atmosphere. Go back to my airbrush. Oh, we're on eraser, that's why. I might kind of just edge a little bit here and there, back. And we're looking for opportunities for the, I might even turn down my flow. So how fast things are coming out of the brush. I don't have it on airbrush mode actually, so let's just turn on opacity there. I might go back into my mask with an airbrush and then just slowly kind of nuke that. So I'll have to change my dodge down a bit. Just managing it ever so slightly in there. I am going to pop a little bit on the other side. So let's go back to the artwork. Let's pick a brighter value. Something in there. I'm going to press the guy in the back around the side a little bit. This guy may be a hint I want the face to feel like it's coming forward. By a bit. It's almost like you know, hot tub fumes. Right? You see sort of the steam coming off hot tubs. And we can go mask out some of the stuff over here. One of the things you can attempt to do in here is get into your mixer brush and start kind of pulling some of that stuff around. Mix. Let's see if we can get the mixer coming out of this a bit better. Sample all layers. So that's a bit better. Gonna give it some atmosphere in there. See, I mean, you can see in your thumbnail though that it's painting pixels. I'm not sure that I want that to be the case, so in this case it might just be better to go with a smudge tool and then just go pick something that is going to be interesting sort of smudge on it. So strength, we're not going to sample all layers. We're not going to finger paint. We're going to go a little bit lower on the strength. And what I'm doing is I'm trying to draw some of the smoke or fumes, I guess, in and around to make them feel a little bit more kind of fluid. I can always switch back to a different brush in there. Turn off those brushes. And I'll just use one of pressure scatter. And a lot of what I'm doing here is just kind of seeing how it feels, and I don't know that it's sort of worth finessing it that much right now. Not loving the effect, so that's fine. We can just work with what we got. I am going to go back into that mask though. I'm going to kind of just take a bit more off at this guy over on this side. So we kind of get that feeling of this thing kind of slowly producing this atmospheric. So I'm gonna actually draw that leg out of the mist, we'll say, or the moisture, just by using an airbrush and then slowly kind of fading that back into the rear section of the cube, or what do we call it, the icosahedron or something like that. I can't quite remember what it was. I can pull some of these out by a little bit and then have them fade back again, which is nice. If I wanted to kind of pull more of this guy out, for instance, to get that dark side of it coming out, that might be beneficial to us because we're kind of doing it over there. Then I would just go back into a sharper brush where we can kind of pull that out. You can ask me, am I going to do concept art for every game that's coming out in the future? Maybe. If it seems like the game's hitting, then I might definitely tuck into it for sure. I That'd be good to do one with new Mafia redos coming out. We were talking about that a little while ago. That might be fun. The game looks fantastic. And I remember playing it the first time and really enjoying it without all the beautiful graphical upgrades. So yeah, I think we'll pull this guy out of that by a little bit because he is more forward in the scene than the rear tendril. The head, I don't want much coming out in front of that because the head's closest to us, but the other stuff, you know, we can start to see these things in these progressively more distant depths, right? So as it maybe moves around the side, it'll get a bit more blurry. But yeah, some of the stuff up front, maybe not. So we'll get rid of that. Even on this little strut. That strut is looking like that. Just gonna kind of come and pull some of these guys out a little bit more. Because it's in the mask though, right? We have lots of ability with this to go back and say I wanted a bit more of that effect back, then I can kind of just mask it back in a little bit depending on what I'm after. So very useful. We might lose that other guy in the distance, so there might be other ways to solve that. But I think that kind of getting in there and seeing that, maybe using some of that blue color over there. So we know which layer that is. That's sort of the water light, which would really only been affecting this tendril. So let's get over into some of those other guys. Woodland Critters, South Park. Tons of ideas, hey? There's only so much time. Let's do something a lot more saturated though. Okay, kind of this old man face here. Need to integrate this blue light way more on the side. Get that bloom going by adding the linear dodge to the brush. Right, we're kind of missing that right now. It's starting to cap out and not give us some of that saturation that we need. That's okay. We'll do it now. I'm keeping an eye on how intense some of this lighting is, because as those lights come up and out, they're going to fade as they get higher and higher, right? So I don't want something feeling like it's hot all the way through, because then we're also going to be injecting value contrast all the way through. And if it's all the same quality of value contrast throughout the entire piece, then gonna definitely steal the show in terms of attention, and it's gonna be hard to read because everything's gonna be super bright, right? So we watch out for that. We haven't even got into putting masks on this yet, so we know that that's an option for us as well. If things start to get out of hand. Some of that rim light crawling up the side here. Am I going to do animals in the next life drawing stream? We haven't finished the outlaw yet, so we will continue with that. But there is a horse, right? So definitely can go in and start to draw aspects of the horse. It might be more important for us at that point to familiarize ourselves with the horse physiology, so we know when we're looking at our piece if we have to extend anything or make more room for rib cage or pelvis, that kind of thing of the horse. It was blocked in pretty quickly, so we could always do that. But the idea is definitely to not only do just human work, but most of what you're gonna be doing as a concept artist, or you're gonna be asked a lot as an artist in general, is to draw people, because obviously we tell human stories. So you got to be really good at that, because everybody stares at humans every day, right? And it doesn't take much to become savvy to know when artwork isn't accurately representing some of those structures, right? So that's why you do tend to spend a lot of time on that as an artist. Even, I would say, like if you're doing a lot of environment art, then of course, like, I mean, it's common sense that if you're drawing a mountainous scene, you're not going to be starting out with potentially drawing human figures as a warm-up. I would go and draw a mountain scene or mountains to warm up. So just depends on what it is you're doing. Some of our little droplets in here coming off of this guy. Maybe do something for Halloween though, for the stream, where we're gonna maybe play with a headless horseman or some sort of typical Halloween vibe character. That would be fun, I think. It's always good for you guys to be doing this as well, right? Not just watching me paint, but to be practicing at the same time. But even obviously when I'm not streaming, you're drawing and painting kind of. If you're ever out of ideas, you can always use upcoming holidays. Like if you were to make Valentine's Day art, like what would that even be? How would you have fun with that? Right? There's lots of things you could do for that to be a cool idea, or at least a inspiration to make something. Whether you love Valentine's Day or dislike it, there's tons of ways you can express yourself through your art. So there we go, we got that kind of movement out the backside. We're not going to get the opportunity as much with this tendril to be able to draw, use the piping in the background as, I want to get not the piping, but the atmospherics in the background to pull that out. So we'll do our best with what we've got, and then we might kind of brainstorm something later to come up with a way of not losing that so much. I think this little bit of light moving over there might be enough, to be honest, because we just have to see it. It doesn't have to be the kind of star of the show or anything, right? So always remember that. It's not like you're treating everything evenly. Because if we did that, everything would be vying for your attention, and then that's not going to be it's not going to be a good call. Let's get a little bit on this piping here as well. In terms of speed, sometimes there's just like this point that I really want to collapse everything because I want to affect things faster. I might actually do that here. It's very dangerous to be doing that when you're dealing with client work, because it's like, well, if they come wandering back and don't like what you did, or you make major mistakes, you think you're going in a good direction, but later you kind of you look back on the art and you're like, that sucks actually. That can be a bad time, but might be something that's helpful for us. So I'm kind of I'm throwing around the idea. Maybe I'll do it, maybe I won't, but just even taking a look at what we've done in the last little bit, like this is, you know, like what we've started with, and even some of the gradient mapping is still, you know, happening over top in here. So we've only spent about an hour on this as well. So once we start getting all the rest of that stuff going, the way it starts to materialize out of that, I think is definitely, it makes it feel good finally, right? When you first start, it's sort of like, I'm just blocking these colors out, and it's just sort of I'm not loving it at all. But yeah, you get that stuff in there. Starting to like how it's coming through. But it does take time, right? Get some of the brighter lights skipping off of some of these surfaces over here. So I'm creating a really bright incidence of the light right below us. Right below the sphere. So I want those things to be fairly equal. So a lot of this light's going to be kind of coming from over this end of the tank and kind of streaking up through there to reflect off of that surface. So that's sort of where I'm looking at this light coming from. You can get away with cheating a little bit of it though, for sure. But you don't want to only be kind of cheating things all the time. It's not only the monster, but also the container. Are you going to do? No. We read that. Halloween is your favorite holiday. I think at some point I was, super excited about it. I would dress up more with friends when I was younger and get together for some drinks, but I don't know so much anymore. Depends if the opportunity arises. I'll probably feel more festive about it. I don't know if you'd say festive with Halloween, but it can be pretty fun. If everybody's into it, it can be fun. Let's get some bright blue light coming out of the side here. So our alien face in here, he's not really been hit by that light yet. So let's fix that. Layering some of the stuff in here does help almost triangulate those light sources, right? And go back over to the other side. Let's take a look with and without. Just to our water light is almost turning into a nice rim for some of these things, which is nice. Kind of following a little bit of whatever I've laid in already in my grayscale as a nice sort of guide, like a visual guide for where some of the values from our lighting will show up. That's why if I were flattening this for sure, I'd be kind of painting out some of the areas where the hue spilled out when I was originally kind of mapping some of the warmer colors. And that's what I'd be inclined to kind of do that to get it finished quick. But again, it's kiss of death if somebody wants any sort of iteration done on the piece, which clients tend to want to do. So yeah, I don't know, I feel like it's actually feeling pretty good for this guy. Our eye glows on a separate layer, so we're getting a little bit of that off of the tank edge. And this is just with a dodge, right? So I'm lightening things, adding light, adding a bit of saturation as I develop some of these shapes, textures. I can get in there with shadows as well, right? The world's my oyster so far as that. So some of the stuff's fairly rough right now. And whenever you're working with a client, a lot of the times, depending on how much time you have to be a little bit rough and painterly with producing your work, especially as a concept artist. If they're not that interested in a super refined painted piece, then you shouldn't be spending a ton of time working out the perfect strokes and the perfect expression for some of the textures and that kind of thing. You have to kind of get the work done. Which isn't always super fun, depending on sort of what you're like as a concept artist. Some people really don't like rendering. I personally enjoy it. Very cathartic for me. So if I don't get a ton of time to do it, I can still, I'm absolutely going to create the work for the client, but I'd be missing out on a little fun as I do it. Go back to the eye glow. I missed a few in here. Let's get those guys going on. Let's really get something a bit more deep and orange. Some of these don't exist. I'm just popping them in, and that is up to me. If I were working with a client, maybe I'd sort of hit them up to see if they were okay with that, if we'd already kind of decided on something. But I feel like we could definitely use that in a couple more of these areas. So some of the solution to this guy out here might be a few more eyes that in that darkness, maybe they're going to shine some self-lighting into some of those shadowy areas, right? And that can be a cheeky way of achieving our goals of lighting some of that stuff up, right? We're kind of doing in these areas over here. You have a 22, where are we here? Boards for Halloween. I don't know what those are. Hey Brown, I'm looking at awesome. I have a 22-inch XP pen display on display right now. I'm excited to get to work on a more professional piece of hardware with bigger screen space than I've ever had before. It'll be nice. Yeah, it'd be interesting to know how that works. I've only ever used Wacom products, not Not necessarily because I love them, but I mean, even this 21 UX that I'm working on is super old now. I think I got it in like 2008, somewhere around there. I've just happened to use these things, right? So I'm, especially now that I've used an iPad with the pencil. iPencil? Is that what it's called? I don't even know. I'm curious to see sort of what the competition's like, because I am not a fanboy of Wacom in the slightest. They just happen to be the kind of first people on the scene really making a product that works, but I think there's lots out there now. I'm just always curious on, you know, if they're cheaper, like what are the downsides, if there are any. I'd see if, you know, the next tablet I get would be one of those. Because say like the new Cintiq, the newest Cintiq 32-inch, it's a massive thing that probably wouldn't even sit on my desk. But you can't, as far as I know, you can't get a version of it without touch, and I really don't think their touch technology is there. I've watched many reviews of them where people go to kind of twist and zoom in and out, and it lags. For me to pay for that, which is a significant amount of money for their 32, it would have to be snappy and instant and tuned, right? And I just don't feel like it's there. Just like their Cintiq companions, I tested them out a few times at let's say SIGGRAPH and whatnot, and it was just too laggy, especially when you know what you're doing and you know your workflows really well. You know, you go to start painting and you're just like, ooh, this is slow, right? This is not what I want in my piece of kit. So yeah, like I said, let me know. Really cool to know that there's some more options for everybody out there. Not all the same characters. To be honest though, this Cintiq has lasted me forever. Knock on wood. My other one died finally, but that one I had for 10 years as well. My 22 HD. So I can't really be that upset about it, I guess. But more competition hopefully means that they'll drive down the price of some of the Cintiq stuff. But I mean, Cintiq came out with the Cintiq 1, which is way more affordable, just way less pressure, way less kind of bells and whistles, which is not a bad thing. So seems to review really well and generally, so I have high hopes. The XP pen, nice. Ouija boards, the ones that are iconic. Oh, okay, yeah. No, I haven't, to be honest. I think my sister did. I don't know. Let's put a little bit of a light back there. Like, this is all blurry, right? We're able to see through it, but you know, we could kind of indicate through that blurry glass that there, you know, the arm is kind of traveling through that, which is nice. It's sort of one of the only spots where it does that, except for maybe over here, which we could pepper with some more of those weaker lights. Anything I can do to make it feel like see-through. I might kind of take down a little bit of this shine on the rim there. I'm not digging it. It's too bright. I mean, it's a nice contrast for the face, but I feel like the face is starting to get enough contrast on its own. I might cut it down and just have a little bit of a sharper reflection, maybe even closer to the face, but definitely dulling it down a bit. It's just kind of competing too much as a warm color. So let's just even hammer that out. Tank rim malt. before we do that, save. I went a really long time there without saving, which makes me sweat, nervous sweat, because any next step in Photoshop, although I don't have a huge problem with Photoshop crashing, could be the end, right? So it's always good to do that. So yeah, let's turn that on now, see how everything's feeling. Not too shabby. So lighting's getting in there. I think with a lot of the tendrils it's feeling good. We still have to service some of the piping and the tendril up top. But I just wanted to really quickly look at nuking a bit of the reflection, the outside rim, so that it's not stealing the show. Because with something like that, let's take it off. With something like that, we're getting contrast on the edges of that mass of white, right, with these dark edges. So as a shape, that thing really starts to pop out, right, because it has that contrast with those values on either side. So it's sort of like, too much. Tuning into what's too much and what's too little is something I think it's good for everybody to do. It's difficult to do. You definitely get better at it over time, but it is something that I let happen over a span of time. Whereas if I kind of just detect if something's gripping me, right, if something's distracting me, time and time and time again. If it keeps doing it, and it's not important, right, it's not my primary or my secondary, it's more of like a tertiary consideration, then I'll nuke it, right, because it's not important, and it's about building a piece that works well rather than because I painted a thing over here, it's very special and I'm being sentimental about it, right? That's not the point of the piece. It's meant to read well. So you can do things like that. And if I want to tweak it later, I can absolutely do that. Like I might have on the bolt housing, I might have a little bit of light catching and bouncing off of that just to kind of indicate that there is this mechanical kind of ring in there. But now it starts to feel like the light's really emanating out of the tank rather than from up above, right? We can get some of that rim light from up above happening just on the top of the tank. We've got sort of like a half inch or a couple centimeters worth of flat spot on the top, which might be nice to just kind of break up the edge of that. So I do like that. I'm gonna lock that. Reason I'm doing that is because it's so close to where I'm painting. I have the habit of accidentally flicking my brush selection, and it will change the layer sometimes if I press things wrong in the wrong order, and I'll start painting into a different layer. And sometimes I'll go super far where I don't want to have to repaint all that stuff, so I'll have to cut it out. It's such a mess, right? So it's good for me sometimes, and that's my workflow, to lock things and make sure that I don't mess that up. So food for thought. But yes, I like kind of getting that out of my face for now, because I'm not interested in it in a primary or a secondary way. We can see it. That's enough for me right now. So descent, no, I haven't. Not at all. Spearboard I have is curved out of slate stone, has all these skulls carved into the sides of it. For spearboard craftsmanship, it's really something. Nice. Sounds interesting. Hey, Erica. This came out nicely. Thank you. Yeah, I was just talking about sort of having the patience for something like this and bringing it to fruition over time, making sure that we kind of plan things through and get to something that we're happy with. So yeah, no, it's feeling pretty good. It's feeling pretty good. One of the things that's happened here is I'm kind of jumping around like I do as I'm building these things. The skin, for instance, is something. Where did we put that skin? So the skin, for instance, when I turn this on and off, you see that I haven't really applied some of that to those other areas. I think I'm going to go back to that now and just kind of complete the pass so that we can look at it and see sort of how that's going. So that's maybe getting some of these almost like pale fleshy areas going on. We've got that overhead light, which is really kind of working in our favor to be able to produce some hot spots and some areas of that fleshier tone coming through. I can almost feel like really wet. Lightening up certain areas in there, right? Because that's sort of the reason I wanted to bring that in is not to have just this ruddy red color running through everything. So let's kind of take a look of what that looks like with and without. So now we're getting some really nice volume out of it, which is the benefit for sure. Some of the stuff down in the shadow gets a little bit lost, so that's a good place to go and feed some of this light in. So if there is a light coming in from up top, the nice thing for the tendrils that do climb higher is that they will be able to get a stronger light, because the light's going to be stronger as it's coming from the light source and then decay as it travels and attenuates. So we can kind of pull some of that stuff out of shadow up top, because it's not going to be as strongly lit as the stuff down closer to the water source in there. So I can find ways to kind of pull that out. Some of the massing in here is getting a little bit too similar and almost like patterned, so I can kind of block out a bigger swath here and there so it's not all the same. Not feeling too bad. We can get into the top over here, doing very similar things. I can work with sort of the visceral qualities of this and bring the bloody or fleshy stuff back in later as well, right? It's a really nice thing about the layering things in Photoshop or any paint package really, is you can get those things to come back if you paint them out. Not a big deal overall. digging the look so far. The yellowish or kind of pale flesh next to the pink, kind of almost irritated skin, bloody flesh, whatever you want. It's a nice contrast, right? It sets it up well to make it feel a bit more visceral. I might save it on the face though. A little bit more of that going on over on this side. The spirit board. Taking the tentacles, thank you. Christmas during pandemic. Black Christmas tree river bubbles, that should be interesting. Nice, very moody. Back to our water light. And I'm just going to tag a little bit of the underside of this guy so that we can get a sense of the overlap. Might push my luck a little bit with how intense that is, just because I want to be able to see that. Overlap in there, have those things kind of tuck up underneath, and see how that feels. Pretty nice. This guy, we'll sneak some in that guy, see if that works well to pull him out, because he is kind of disappearing a bit in behind, and not so much of that atmospheric. He's going to reach up in behind him. Let's see how we can get that working. What I'm thinking of with this is some of that light from the tank is going to bounce off of the icosahedron or whatever it is, come back in. But I'll really want to make this weak in terms of that reflection, because it's going to attenuate like crazy. When light reflects off of something, it attenuates. It doesn't carry its same initial lux intensity. Lux being the kind of power of the intensity of the light. So if we're doing it there, we could kind of sneak that into a few more places. But again, I want to make that feel reasonable. Not like I'm breaking the bank and just throwing rim light everywhere willy-nilly. Paying some respect to the light source. Turn on my smoothing a bit here. Kind of get this guy going on a bit. And pop in a little bit of that bright light from under this guy. He's kind of blocking it, so we'll get some of that reflection kind of moving up underneath. That's pretty good, I think. Do you have Gothic Christmas tree? No, I don't. I don't think that's a very usual thing to have. I usually get a real tree every year from a Christmas tree guy that I know. Smells amazing when you have those fresh trees at Christmas. And of course, with the snow, if we're lucky enough in Vancouver to get snow, but yeah, I prefer that over anything. Like a false Christmas tree. I had never heard for Christmas wrapping paper. Think about it. Nice, love that film. Okay, so we're just gonna wrap up here with today's stream. So I think we got pretty far in terms of creating a sense of what the final will look like. There are some things that I can spend time doing, like working with some of the glass and some of the texture on there. Not necessarily the super fun stuff, I would say, but you know, still something I think would be something that I'd focus on for the end. I'd blur some of those lines on the inside so the glass doesn't start to feel like it's super clear. But there we go. So what we had before, so let's just turn off some of these things, right? We started adding some of those other elements in there, right? So over a couple hours, we could really start to bring it home for the container. So I think at that point, you know, we might call it on this piece. In terms of me kind of carrying forward this as a concept art piece, I definitely start to clean up some of those edges in there, like the piping and a little bit of the kind of tertiary elements of the tank. But I think that we've gone pretty far with it, and from our initial ideation and thumbnailing to this, sort of, you know, probably would amount to about 10 hours worth of work, right? And so probably about a typical day, especially since I'm answering questions a lot and kind of being distracted away from the actual painting and drawing. We could probably fit this into one day, so pretty far, right, for a piece of concept art. I've got some practice doing it, so it'd be a little bit faster for me, but you can sort of see how we approached that vibe with this guy there. So not quite finished, but we're gonna call that close enough for the stream today and for the piece. Might be something I come back to and kind of pop that up on the old internets at some point. But anyway, try some of those methods out on your own. See how some of that feels for you, and hopefully you can kind of create that creepy vibe for your own concept art piece in the future. Okay, otherwise really nice to see you guys, or have you in the stream, and we'll be back on Monday with some more of the Outlaw, start to maybe put some finishing touches on that. Okay, so have a great week, everybody, and we will maybe see you next week. Take care. Thanks, guys.